Thank you,
yes.
Ambassador, Moderator. And since I'm speaking for the first time at this conference, allow me to pay tribute to the founder of CMS, Dr. Gandhi, whose vision in life was so amazing and so inspiring. It has not just inspired the students here or the Indian people, but the entire world, and to bring together chief justices of the world. This is the only time that I've heard that a school can bring together chief justices of the world at a conference. And that's something that is worth noting. And yesterday we had a wonderful reception, a breathtaking reception. And one statement that I picked from that reception was that the rule of life is the rule of love. I think that's what the director of ceremonies said at that time. The rule of law is the rule of love. And that, I think she was referring to love around the world and so on. Same thing about the rule of international law. Is a rule of love as well, because I think states should love each other, around the community of nations should love each other. So I think that was very important. Most of the things that I would have said have been said by the eminent, the distinguished panelists here who have gone into it. But let me say that I agree with the things that have been said about the United Nations, and to agree with you, Ambassador, that there's also a lot of good that the United Nations has done, and so we cannot just write off the United Nations and so on. We cannot just focus on its failures and limitations, and when we see a fractured world, we should say, oh, it's because of the United Nations. We should, maybe there are things, the limitations that the UN Charter, as it exists now, are the ones that we should be talking about. And so, in my view, time for reform of the United Nations structures as well as the Charter is here. Colleagues have spoken about the Security Council. I can also speak about the international the ICJ, for example. It's supposed to enforce international law, but the enforcement mechanisms are not adequate. So in the reforms that we want to talk about, as we look at the entire United Nations structure, we should also look at the arms, the different arms of the United Nations, and see how we can strengthen them. The advantage that we have now is that we have had many lessons over the 80 years. And those lessons we cannot ignore. And I believe that even the Global Governance Forum has looked at, or continues to look at, those lessons of the 80 years and what it is that we can do to strengthen the United Nations. So yes, reform of the United Nations, reform of the UN Charter, those are long overdue, and this is a time. One element that I think a colleague member of the panel mentioned was the issue of political will and political solutions and so on. Perhaps as we do the reforms, we also look at how much room we give to the issue of political will, so that we can strengthen the enforcement mechanisms, even through the other structures. But otherwise, most of the things are the ones that my dear colleagues have mentioned. If there's anything else I must add, Ambassador, I am ready to add. But thank you so much.
Yes. So, thank you very much. And because I'm going back to the topic, I would like us, I would have wished we could have taken a couple of questions from the young people we have there, maybe 1 or 2 questions, because I think the interaction is good. So maybe we could open the floor if we just have 1 or 2 questions. I think somebody's hand is up there. If you have a mic, can you please pose question to the panel?
So students, you have an opportunity, put up your thoughtful queries.
Good morning, esteemed judges and dignitaries. I have a question which is in my mind since last year. I tried asking last year, but I did not get an answer, unfortunately. The question is, should judicial corporations and organizations have the rights to intervene in legislature law-making decisions? That means, for example, if legislature passes a law which does not bind to an international agreement, the judicial body, being an independent body, can tell the government, no, this does not bind to an international agreement, and thus you should not pass this law. This judicial corporation should be in control of the United Nations, and therefore it is ensured that any law passed in any nation is directly or indirectly influenced by some or the other charter of the United Nations.
Yes. The question? Okay. I think if I get it right, is that national legislation versus international commitments. If a country is passing a national legislation which is not in conformity with the international commitments, what do you do about it? At least, I don't know if I represented you. That's the way I understood it.
You know, although there is such a thing as a hierarchy of law, right? I am not a lawyer myself, but I live in Spain, I live in the European Union, and in the European Union you have a very important principle of subsidiarity, right? In other words, you give authority to different levels of government depending on the particular issue at hand. So on issues of environment, on issues of security, it makes sense to have laws that are applicable to the entire European Union, right? It makes no sense for countries to have national environmental legislation because environment is a problem that crosses borders, right? However, it may be quite legitimate that, for instance, education becomes a responsibility of the local government, and other issues that are much more connected, with the life of the community. I think that the principle of subsidiarity is a very, very important one, and it is something that we have embedded in the second United Nations Charter, right? I don't know whether that addresses the concern that you were raising in your question.
Yeah, just to add one more point. In terms of what the courts can do in those circumstances, courts will normally wait for something brought to them. So what you are referring to is what we call power of judicial review. And power of judicial review is exercised after the law has been passed and it is brought over to the court to review that law for conformity with as we talked about the reforms, even the International Court of Justice, I think what we should be suggesting is that when the reforms take place, that power should be given to the International Court of Justice so that they can conduct a judicial review of any such law that is inconsistent with. So I think that's a little bit that I wanted to add. Thank you.